Joining us now, former U.S. attorney and a professor at the University of Alabama Law School, Joyce Vance. So, Joyce, as you watch this today, what's striking you?
Well, this is an interesting conversation that you've been having, Katie, about the technical form of questions and when they're objectionable. And there's also something else going on a parallel track here. And that's the judge's concern, certainly. The prosecution should also be concerned about whether any of the questions that they're asking might elicit information from Cohen that could cause a mistrial. Because they're in really dangerous territory here when they're talking about Michael Cohen's prior federal conviction. Cohen is convicted for campaign finance-related crimes, in part. Donald Trump the jury will be charged that that's one of the options here. And so they have to avoid a situation where they say that Trump's crimes can be proven by Cohen's prior crimes. That's why we saw Judge Merchan give this very careful limiting instruction to the jury a few moments ago, telling them you can consider these answers for the truthfulness of this witness, but not for the guilt of this defendant.
And let me ask you a question, Judge.
We've
Joyce.
Just promoted you, Joyce.
So my husband is a judge, so I get it all the time. I answer to it.
So Susan Hoffinger just said, did you ever sign an agreement with Mr. Costello? And I believe that that's Robert Costello, who might be another witness that comes up for the defense. And might be a witness that comes up for the defense, and who's an associate of Rudy Giuliani. And Cohen says, no, ma'am. But he doesn't just say no, ma'am. He goes on to say, I didn't trust him. I didn't like the way that he kept invoking Rudy Giuliani. And my concern was that anything I said to him would go back to President Trump. Why was he allowed to add all that other stuff?
Well, once the witness starts answering, unless the defense objects, he can continue. And this is one of the risks, I think, that you can expose as a defense lawyer, you can expose yourself to, is that once you open the door to testimony about somebody like Bob Costello, then you don't know what's coming next. I think this speculation that Costello will testify is very interesting because in large part he would be offered to impeach Cohen's credibility, to say that what Cohen is saying on the witness stand today is different than what he told Bob Costello when Costello was acting as an intermediary by some accounts between Cohen and Trump. I'm not sure that we'll actually see him take the stand.
But Joyce, wasn't he conflicted because he was an intermediary and was not under retainer and was actually potentially, as Michael Cohen feared, doing Donald Trump's bidding?
And that's exactly the problem. There's no telling what could come out if Costello is offered as a witness on cross-examination. It would be appropriate for the prosecutors to go into all of that in an effort to bolster Cohen's credibility, and some of that could be fairly damaging to Donald Trump.
Joyce, what do you think of there's going to be a break after Michael Cohen's done, after the prosecution rests, and say the defense doesn't call any witnesses? That could happen today. We won't hear closing arguments until next Tuesday at the earliest because of scheduling and Memorial Day. How is that potentially going to affect both the prosecution and the defense?
So the judge is making the best of a bad situation here, because what you always want to do is to have closing arguments, instruct the jury on the law, and then move them straight into deliberation. Something I hated as a prosecutor was if, for instance, that happened on a Friday afternoon and you had a break until Monday morning before deliberations have. Of course, here with the 4-day weekend, that would have been much worse. Look, memories dim. There's just all sorts of problems happen in that situation. But the real risk here, I think that the judge was calculating, was what would have happened if the jury had the case, if they'd been instructed, and then there was this long break with Donald Trump out campaigning. And was there some risk that the jury could have been inadvertently or maybe on purpose exposed to inappropriate commentary on the case? It's tough as a juror in today's media environment to completely isolate yourself like that, especially over the holiday weekend. And so I think he's doing the best he can. How does it impact the parties?
Point, isn't it? That's really smart.
It gives the parties a nice, Yeah, I mean, that's just a very, when you try a lot of cases, you see that come up where that time period can prejudice a jury. As a prosecutor or as a defense lawyer, I think Danny will back me up here. You're not unhappy to have this chunk of time to prepare your closing statements. And there will also be a charge conference where the lawyers work out the instructions to the jury with the judge. They have some real issues there, many of them centered on what exactly the government has to prove about this additional crime they're alleging that this entire scheme was designed to aid or conceal. That's the part of this crime that turns the misdemeanor into a felony. And there's been some sparring this morning that suggests that charge conference will have a lot going on in it.